Hi, everyone. I'm Casey from the LegalTech Fund. Welcome back to another episode of In Studio. I'm joined today by Nino, founder and CEO of Antidote, a company tackling one of law's biggest blind spots, billing compliance. Antidote is an AI-powered platform that helps law firms get paid faster and more accurately by eliminating the manual work behind outside counsel guidelines. It turns a process most lawyers dread into one that's seamless, transparent, and profitable. We'll dive into how Nino and his team are reshaping the business of law, what's next for Antidote, and how automation is turning billing from a point of friction to a point of value. Nino, it's great to have you in studio. We've known you a while now, even from your last startup. So it's very exciting to have you in the TLTF portfolio and back in studio.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Casey.
So since your last in studio conversation was back, what would you say progress that you've made in terms of adoption or any other type of ROI with firms?
Yeah, absolutely. Funnily enough, I was talking about this last week, which of course was the wonderful summit that TLTF put on. And I created a slide on exactly this, which was a useful kind of, I suppose, a useful way of realizing what we had accomplished. And so for us, really, since talking to Zach a little while ago, we had our first pilots. And then from those pilots, we converted those first pilots into our first customers. Initially those first customers were in the UK, and now we have the UK, EU, North America, and Australia, which I'm very excited about. And obviously, the way the product works, we have literally flagged and fixed several $1 million worth of time entries that would have otherwise hit the cutting room floor, so to speak. The team is growing, so it's probably doubled since I spoke to Zach. And of course, we have raised very recently a seed round of funding, so about a $5 million seed round, which gives us the opportunity to do lots of exciting things with the company and the direction and the speed of travel. And then, of course, most importantly, I had the opportunity to present at the summit last week, which was a highlight.
Awesome. Sounds like a lot of exciting things. And it's great that your product can so clearly show value to firms that are adopting it. I think that's very important and something that all founders should sort of pay attention to. How do you see billing data becoming a strategic insight layer for firm leadership or finance teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely critical. Margins were already being squeezed inside law firms before the AI boom, and whilst AI creates many opportunities, it also creates a squeeze on what maybe some of the traditional work inside a firm. And so when you combine that with the fact that a lot of the firms don't know the very basics when it comes to things like lawyer utilization, profitability of matters, of course, where they're leaking revenue and realization. Sometimes several firms I've spoken to don't even know what invoices they have sent out and to whom. So in my opinion, billing data is the overlooked low-hanging fruit inside any law firm. And firms can actually increase their revenue through billing automation. And to put it another way, it's sort of an odd one to say in a way, but law firms can make more money by doing less, by doing things more efficiently when it comes to this, and leveraging and understanding. If you take Antidote, obviously we're removing a pretty manual task that affects billing teams, that affects partners, that affects senior associates, and giving them more time to either do billable work or be at home with their feet up type thing. That's just one aspect. There's a whole number of other things along the whipped cash life cycle where billing data is critical for a law firm going forward in 2026 and beyond.
And you mentioned sort of realization, lockup. A lot of law firms that we talk to kind of treat these as almost inevitable or just sort of a, cost of doing business. Is that your perspective as well? Or do you think Antidote can help change some of that?
Yeah, So I have an oddly encyclopedic knowledge of these facts and figures. Again, partly because of the presentation, but also from the outset of solving this problem. So to give you an idea, realization has been average realization has been roughly static at 84% for years, and lockup, so the amount of time that sort of cash is sat, not hasn't been paid to the law firm, it has been stuck at about 140 days. Again, it will vary by industry and location and work type, but those are kind of broadly, certainly directionally correct. And it's very difficult for a law firm to run an efficient business with those kind of headwinds. And you're absolutely right. A lot of people just sort of baked it into the cost of doing business. With Antidote, it's sort of reshaping that entirely. So we're shifting compliance upstream, closer to when the work is actually done, and the result is a sort of multi-percentage gain in realization. So again, it's like we help you get paid for the work that you have done. The sort of some of the CFOs that we spoke to describe their billing processes as like a sort of leaky bucket, and Antidote is plugging one out of several holes in that bucket. So the outcome is, if we're finding stuff and flagging it and correcting it, you're going to have fewer write-offs. Therefore, you're going to increase your realization. And when you submit an invoice, first of all, when it comes to month end and you need to kind of do your pre-bill check, if all that time's already been corrected, well, your pre-bill check should be a kind of formality in many respects. So the invoice goes out and it has like a 95% chance of being accepted into the client's e-billing or natural kind of billing system. Therefore, you're going to get paid sooner. So you're not doing invoice ping pong in that respect. So you're reducing the time to pay. And so I think that's one of the things that we've noticed is oddly, lawyers prefer the bit that they don't have to do the task they didn't want to do, but the sort of law firm management side can see a material impact on realization and lockup.
And we know that Antidote is using AI in its solution, and I'm curious how you as a team decide what parts of the workflow should be automated or use AI versus what parts maybe still need that human review, if any.
Yeah, so Antidote, absolutely right. We use AI to check all the time entries, check all the outside counsel guidelines, and effectively we have an over 95% accuracy rate when it comes to identifying the correct time entries and providing fixes for those, essentially making time entries compliant. Obviously, when you first come in, you don't have that, if you like. This is the new way of doing something, and so you need to earn that trust over time. And so what we typically see is firms keeping some kind of human in the loop during the kind of initial process. So somebody will be looking at the initial checks of what we do over time, whereas somebody might look at everything in the beginning. Again, trust is earned, so they'll begin to trust, assuming that they're kind of happy with the tool, which they have been so far. And then it moves from an all the time check to a kind of periodic check of what's coming out, almost like batch testing in a factory, if you like. Having said all that, I think you can automate this entire piece. However, I think it's sort of best practice, if you like, to review what you're ultimately sending out to your client, both to double check the quality of what the firm is distributing, but also to understand the story that you're telling the client. And if you rely entirely on the machine and never actually look at the output, then you're going to be missing that element. So whilst I think you can, and we automate as much as we can, I think it's important to retain some of that knowledge, with the billing teams, with the partners, etc. It just doesn't need to be done in quite the way it's being done today.
Makes sense. And I think that's a trend that we're seeing as well with other companies in the portfolio and outside, is that trust is earned. And so maybe it takes some time for lawyers to get used to the system and fully trust it. And then over time, they start to trust it more. But keeping in mind that final review is always probably going to be important in the legal profession. So thinking about the workflow and sort of design of the product, How did you think about design with the team when you were thinking about driving engagement with this product? And how do you think about design as it relates to being embedded with other systems that lawyers already have?
Yeah, so design is it's another critical component. I say component actually. At Aperio, so my last company that I built, my very first hire was a senior UX designer. Predominantly because law firms are filled with people, and historically, um, some of the B2B SaaS or legal tech, if you like, is definitely underserved or underwhelmed when it comes to kind of user experience. Yeah, it's filled with people. These are the same people that have smartphones, tablets, book their holidays online, or all the rest of it. So there was a big gap between a kind of consumer grade user experience and kind of what people had in their day-to-day lives. I think that gap has dramatically shifted over the last 3 or 4 years. Sorry, narrowed is what I should say. And um, so I think it's no longer a differentiator. It is absolutely like critical for any company coming out now to put design at the forefront of what they do. And so again, with us, with Antidote, design was one of the first hires that we did alongside some of the engineers. We're really thinking, excuse me, about like user journey. I think it's that kind of interoperability is an interesting point, or at least kind of understanding the user and where they spend their time, not just in your product. So we spent hours and hours and hours thinking about the design of our application and different user flows and so on and so forth. One of our early learnings, and this was a piece that we got at Aperio that we ported to Antidote, was lawyers are, and I say this as an ex-lawyer and married to a lawyer, they are sometimes change averse or risk averse, and they like what they know, and so to a certain extent, it's always going to be hard introducing a new system for an already very busy lawyer to learn, no matter how beautiful it looks. And so whilst we have the beautiful application and we will continue to refine that, forever, we also thought a lot about where are lawyers today and can we deliver the value of what we do and meet the lawyers kind of in their current workflows. And so one of the pieces we did, for instance, was literally provide, and it's fully configurable for each lawyer, each firm, but the ability to deliver value in email. So lawyers spend an inordinate amount of time in Outlook predominantly, and we can deliver an email. We learned this for the first pilot customers, but we can deliver an email, whether daily, weekly, monthly, a combination of, that will provide the same value and say, Casey, last week, here are the the entries that you did. These are the ones Antidote flagged. Here are the suggested corrections. And you could do what you need to do in that email. You could accept the changes without ever having to log into a new system. It doesn't. I don't care if a lawyer never logs into our system, as long as they're getting value from ultimately what Antidote is doing. And that's sort of one example of how we think about things and how Antidote's addressing exactly that problem.
Yeah, really meeting lawyers where they are, I think, is important. And when you think beyond sort of outside counsel guidelines and compliance into like the bigger picture, how do you see Antidote influencing the relationship between your law firm customers and their clients over time?
Yeah, so ultimately we want Antidote, and again, this is similar values from the days of Aperio, but which is, in our core value here, our first value is all about transparency. And so ultimately we don't want to, well, we'd like to, be in between the law firm and their client so ideally you'd be able to, the client could have whatever rules that are specific to that client about what they will and won't pay for. The law firm could apply those rules, but actually show the client how they've applied those rules, and provide a kind of transparent piece. So one, there's no surprises in that respect. Two, you've got you don't have the asymmetry of information that kind of currently exists, and that can obviously lead, if you've got asymmetry of information, it means, well, it definitely doesn't help from a trust perspective. But I think that ability to surface the data to the client is an interesting one. But overall, I mean, ultimately, if you're delivering bills, this is what we see today. This is, again, a side effect of what we do is clients think that their law firms have their house in order, because when they receive bills, the time, first of all, is telling a story as part of the whole. If you read all the narratives in the invoice, they're telling a story about what the work has been done, but also they're delivering a bill that is obviously clean and coherent, but passes their internal checks and systems and so on and so forth. So it gives a much better, if you like, impression of the law firm and their, I guess, their professionalism when it comes to things like this. So as I say, there are a number of things and along the whipped cash life cycle that we can and will tackle as Antidote. We'll build additional products along that. In fact, we're already doing so. But I think if we kind of take a step back, it's about breeding trust between law firms and their customers, their clients, and vice versa. And I think a lot of that comes through transparency.
Yeah, I think that trust and transparency is kind of the theme here. First with you and your clients, but also their end clients too. It kind of needs to be all the way down the stack. And you mentioned some new products potentially coming down the pipe. If we fast forward a couple of years, what do you think the ideal billing stack looks like inside the law firm, and where does Antidote fit in?
Yeah, so there's the incumbents that are pretty well established when it comes to, if you like, the sort of finance and billing systems, and I think rather than trying to replace within 5 years, because even law firms that are moving from an upgrade from with the same company, that's still a medium-sized law firm, that's a multi-year project just to do that. So the ultimate, the ideal billing stack, I would be agnostic in that respect, and be able to work with best in breed across the stack. I think from a law firm perspective, it's about it's from the very beginning making sure that the instructions that come in this is all in one place, by the way. The instructions are clear, that there's a budget that's outset from the beginning. That budget is ultimately shared with the client. Lawyers recording time are recording it in a compliant way, both according with internal firm policies and also with the client policies in that respect. Bills, clients are aware of fees before the bill actually lands. They can see any adjustments that have been made as they're made, not after the fact. And then also when an invoice is delivered, it's clean, clear, accurate, and there's no surprises for the client. And the client in that way will be able to push it up the chain and get it paid, nice and quickly. It's today, if you break down, that sounds very obvious, but if you break those components down, at the moment, most firms are not necessarily aware, well, certainly the lawyers within the firms are not aware of necessarily the full scope of the work. They're not necessarily aware of the client's outside counsel guidelines that are specific to that particular matter or particular client. Time is often rushed in at the end of the month, and then there's the kind of checks that are done. Client is not aware of fees unless somebody has bothered to kind of tell them. None of this is automated. Invoice lands, it's more than what you thought. There's a disagreement that happens, and then then you have your billing guidelines which don't match, and so on and so forth. So there's no wonder that realization rates are 84%, and if lockup is at 140 days today. But if you like, the kind of 5-year horizon is all of those pieces there being joined up and then also visible from a client perspective as well. I think they'll demand it in the not too distant future.
That sounds like a much more future, and we're excited to see where Antidote can kind of power that and keep us posted on all the exciting new developments. And thank you again for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you, Casey.